From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Wednesday. We have a good show on tap for you, as always. You know, I always say that. Am I ever going to come on and say, good morning, thanks for joining us. We got a lousy show for you today. I don't know why you want to watch. Of course not. Okay, so I'm going to stop stating the obvious. Okay, you know if you're watching it's a good show. We're going to open up the phone lines for you this morning. One of our legal programs looking at medical malpractice, the idea of whether or not you felt you've been wronged by a doctor or a hospital, how you know if you have a case. You know the routine if you've been with us before. If not, I'm going to let our guest kind of fill us in before we start opening up the line to calls. But join in the conversation, 615-737-7587. I think at one time or another, all of us maybe walked out of a doctor's office or a hospital and thought to ourselves, was I done wrong here? Do I have a case? Is this malpractice? Was my doctor right or wrong? To answer those questions and tell us how you know if you have a case, malpractice attorney Clint Kelly.
Good morning, Nick.
Very good to have you on. As always, a pleasure, sir. I find this to be a very, very interesting aspect of the law. I mean, we've all grown up watching medical programs and legal shows. The whole idea of suing and why I find it interesting is that in society in general, we all place certain people on a pedestal, look up to them and place our blind trust in them. And among those that I think I'm guilty of this as well, I kind of put my blind trust in my physicians. I'm referred to them, I develop a relationship with them, and I trust them. And so it doesn't occur to me sometimes, have I gotten proper care? Would you agree? I mean, that's what's kind of unique about that. The others that maybe we feel this way about, maybe law enforcement officer, teachers, you know, doctors especially, though. Don't they get a pass sometimes in the minds of the public until really they find out that they've been injured?
I think it's bred into us.
Yeah, it is.
As native Tennesseans.
Day one. It's a doctor. He's not going to hurt me.
Right.
She's not going to hurt me.
You're brought up to think that way. You're brought up to respect and have great loyalty to your physician. And so when something goes bad, you feel like you've been betrayed. And that's a lot of times what starts these cases off is people feeling like they've been betrayed by their healthcare provider.
Right. And I think now, I don't know if you'd agree with this. If you have a doctor that you've had a relationship for years and years, you get to know them, and those I think I'm more comfortable with. But a lot of times we have folks that are showing up at you know, walk-in clinics, or they're going for some kind of special treatments, you know, the fertility type things or the erection issues, where we've had doctors where you're meeting for the first time for treatments that you really don't know much about them, right? Is that where there's more risk? Or could it I know it could happen with a doctor that's a family doctor for years, but you know, over a period of time, you're going to see a trend. And if they've been good all along?
Well, it's a good question. It is going to be more likely to happen when there is a breakdown in the continuity of care.
Right. Okay,
either where you see somebody for the first time, or what's happening now in the hospitals where you see what they call hospitalists. These are people in the hospital that take care of you from day to day. There's a lot of rotation. So you may see Dr. Roberts one day, and then you may see Dr. Jones the next day. And the question is Dr. Roberts and Dr. Jones on the same page about your treatment? Are they communicating? And there have been cases where they don't communicate, and that's a lot of times where medical errors take place. Okay,
so people who have watched the show before know, Clint, your background and all of that, but I know a lot of people tune in and maybe are wondering, okay, so malpractice, how do I know? I've always wondered about this. What are the main things people need to remember about whether or not they've suffered malpractice? They're asking themselves that question.
Well, the first thing you want to do is ask yourself, in a gut feeling, has something been done wrong to me or a family member? Sometimes the first place you will hear that from is from another doctor who will look at the situation and say, this is a screw-up.
How often are other doctors going to speak out against colleagues?
It happens a lot, Nick.
Really?
It really does.
I thought that would be hard to do. They're like a fraternity. I don't go bad on you, you don't go bad on me.
Now, there's a big difference between what they say behind closed doors to the patient and what they will ultimately testify to, because many times what they'll do is they'll say something critical about another physician. Then I go talk to that doctor and ask that doctor, did you say that this, you know, Dr. Jones fouled up in this case, or that there was negligence? He says, well, you know, yeah, that you could look at it that way, but other physicians might see it another way, and so it becomes milquetoast after that. Now, there are some that'll just flat out say, yeah, and I'll say it under oath. But very few do that. Most just kind of back off because they don't want to get involved.
In those cases, are you able to force them to testify based on it, or is that pretty much, well, How do you go about proving the case then?
Well, it's more the latter. You don't want to be in a position where you have to force a doctor to give an opinion, because that's going to look pretty bad for you.
Okay, so again, the standard of care is the key point here. When you ask, there are people obviously who are going to have negative results coming from a hospital. Someone's going to die, or you're going to get sick. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean doctors aren't miracle workers. People are going to have bad results. What is the difference? Where's the line where it becomes just a bad result that was unavoidable and malpractice?
All right. You're exactly right. The medicine calls those bad outcomes.
Okay.
A bad outcome is not the basis of a negligence action unless you can prove that that bad outcome was the product of substandard care. There's a minimum standard of care, and it's basically pretty low. It's what we call basic care or acceptable care.
Is there a book or is there a guideline written in every hospital on the wall? This is the minimum. Who sets that standard?
It is set by the physicians and the healthcare providers directly. They are trained to provide basic care, therefore they're knowledgeable of what that is. Now, Nick, there are situations where books can advise what the standard of care is. They don't dictate what it is, but they give you some idea of a guidance, if you will. There's certain guidelines for treating heart attacks, certain guidelines for treating infections that are known in medical textbooks by many physicians, and they will use that as a guide for the standard of care. But under Tennessee law, the standard of care is established by the healthcare provider. You're expert in the case.
And that's what you refer to, and you're asking in court. You'll make the case, listen, this was the result, and here is the clear guideline that they did not live up to.
Correct.
They did not live up to the standard of care. There's a problem here. And other doctors then, or experts, can say, yeah, it's pretty clear. This is what they should have done, and we know, based on the records, this is what they did. Didn't meet that record.
Those are the cases I take.
Yep,
there has to be a clear line, a very, very easy way to show whether a doctor broke the rules or a healthcare provider broke the rules. If it gets fuzzy or muddy, I tend to reject those cases because they're hard to prove. At the end of the day, the jury's sitting there going, well, I don't know which standard to follow, Mr. Kelly. I don't know if I can be sure there was malpractice or negligence here, and I don't like to get in those kind of situations.
Would you imagine there's people sitting out there right now, possibly watching this show, or people that know someone that have potentially legitimate cases that they have not acted on?
Yes, because recent studies show that only 1% of medical negligence is actually reported. So think about that.
What?
1% of negligence cases reported. That's according to the Journal of American Medical Association.
Is this that they don't know that they've been wronged, or is this that they just figure there's nothing they can do about it?
Both.
Really? But there is something you can do about it, obviously.
There is, but most,
1%.
well, it goes back to what you said earlier about people trusting their doctors, healthcare providers. A lot of people just aren't going to do it, Nick, because they feel like that it's not appropriate. A lot of people don't feel comfortable suing their doctor, and one of the concerns that those people have is they think, if I sue my doctor, what is that going to mean for me down the road in terms of getting future health care? Is that going to somehow compromise my ability to get care down the road? And a lot of people say, I just don't want to mess with it. Scared of it.
What's the answer to that question?
It cannot.
I mean, there's not some record that puts on that you're a guy that sues. Frivolous lawsuits are ridiculous and wrong, but you don't take on anything frivolous, because the bottom line is you turn away more people who come in saying, well, I understand there's not an actionable case here, or two, it's just not worth the effort because unfortunately there's no damages, right? I mean, the cases you take are not frivolous.
I've never seen a case where a patient filed a lawsuit and either got a recovery or even didn't get a recovery and was refused medical treatment in the future by the healthcare providers. First of all, there's too many of them. They can't possibly know about it. But secondly, every case is different, and doctors don't care about whether you filed a lawsuit before. Their job is to take care of you at that time.
I think when you come in as a new patient to a doctor, they don't have some database that they go on. Okay, Nick Pierce, let's see. Does his name come up? I'm going to Google it and see if he sued a doctor. Oh, there it is. I'm not going to take him. That doesn't happen. Okay, but that's interesting. People think that.
Yeah.
That's an amazing number of only 1%.
Particularly people who are on Medicare. Some people that are on Obamacare, some kind of government-assisted health care, they do believe that will permeate or get out into the database, and that will somehow compromise them. And if you're like 70 or 75 years old and you heavily depend on Medicare, the last thing you're going to do, even though it's error to think this, last thing you do is put yourself in a position where you can't get care.
I gotcha. So that's why we need to clarify that. Now, and the other part, maybe sometimes thinking, okay, I can't do this because I can't afford to hire an attorney, and of course, fine attorneys like him are paid on a contingency, which means you only get paid if you win, and you take a portion of the settlement.
That's correct.
They don't have to pay you up front. There's no retainer.
No, the patient owes nothing unless I recover money for him.
And that's why you're very picky about the cases.
Absolutely.
Because your time is very valuable. Listen, before we take our first break, let's just squeeze in a call from my friend Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
I'd like for Mr. Kelly I'm going to throw two things out there and get his comment on them. One thing I noticed, I think it was yesterday, the day before yesterday, the Board of Accountability for Physicians is taking up to 2 years to address some complaints.
I was going to ask you about this. It was in the paper. Yeah.
Okay. Second thing is, I'm finding a lot of cases of the people that's working for doctors. Doctors anymore don't want to pay nurses. They don't want to pay the nurse fee. So they're hiring technicians or people that not even LPNs to run their office and do different things. And I'm finding that they lose a lot of ability to be able to address when you call for a prescription even down. They don't know what prescription is, what it's for, or nothing. And it's a lot of confusion. And I know a lot of times, I know cardiologists or whatever, they send the information to your regular MD, and the MD, you see him and he don't even know anything about it. So it gets lost in translation. There seems like there's no communications going on here. I'd like for him to comment on those two things.
Hey, great questions, Joe.
All right. With regard to the former question about the Board of Medical Examiners, I'm not surprised by that at all. I think that's been a toothless organization for many years. Now, if you speak to doctors who know other doctors who've had, substance abuse issues, drunks, the board can be brought to bear in those situations. They're very limited, very rare. It's basically a toothless organization. So the fact that there are delays surprised me not at all. I mean, I used to tell patients that if you don't have a malpractice case, you could at least go to the Board of Medical Examiners and report a doctor if that physician did wrong. Now it's not even worth my breath to tell them that anymore.
Yeah, and when they do anyway, and the media has tried to track that down, it's all, we can't find out. We can't find out that a complaint's been filed. They won't tell us anything until, in the rare instance, they take action. And you're absolutely right.
And when they take it, you don't even know it. I mean, it's like I said, it's a toothless organization.
Is that right? Yeah, I guess you don't even know. And this is made up, the board, by doctors, right?
The only time you're going to know about it is if there is a public censure, a public order, what they call a consent order, where the doctor basically admits he did wrongdoing. You know how rare that is, Nick? I mean, it's really upsetting to me that this board exists and it's virtually worthless. Now, as to the second question he raised, you better get used to it, Joe. This is the way medicine's going to be into the foreseeable future. There are a lot of economic reasons and social reasons why this has happened, but the bottom line is because you're going to have this basically downdraft of medicine where responsibility is going to be spread down to the bottom, to the lowest level, the healthcare provider, whether it's, physician assistant, licensed practical nurse, in some cases medical technician, you're going to have those people making bigger and bigger decisions.
Sometimes you never even see the doctor.
That's correct.
You never see the doctor, and you've got these nurses, and some of them are very capable, but the doctor is the one with all that education background that you want at least to come in and talk to you.
So in my opinion, you're going to see a much greater boom of medical negligence taking place, or actually healthcare provider negligence, because you got people making decisions or will be making decisions who either aren't qualified or don't communicate with the doctor.
I think the field of medicine, and I don't want to overgeneralize because I'm sure there are some very young graduates that have come out that are good doctors. I go to an older doctor, old school guy, Dr. Gaston Jr. Love him. Summit Hospital, and he's old school. But what I mean by that is he's very knowledgeable and he stays up to speed on everything. But one reason I like him, and he's older now, is that he comes in and he spends time with you. You always see him, you talk to him, and it's personal, and he'll answer all of your questions. It seems like he'll take some time. Okay, and I know he's very busy, but he takes time with all of his clients and goes through it. I've had some experience when I used to live in LA where these doctors, and I'm sure they were very busy, but they're younger guys and they're very good, but boom, I hardly ever saw them. Or their bedside manner, which to me counts for a lot, did not exist. If I don't like you, I don't care how good you are, unless you're operating on my brain, I'm not going to put up with you.
Well, the Dr. Gassons of the world, unfortunately, are going down, are retiring as we speak. And I tell you what also is a difference that's sad is, fewer and fewer of your family doctors are going to come to the hospital and see you when you're hospitalized. You're going to be under the care, like I said, of a hospitalist who's a stranger. And that's going to be where medicine also takes us, because it's where the money goes.
Yeah, and if that works, fine. But as he said, part of the problem is going to be communication then, right? Sharing. The people who really know don't get all the full message, and then mistakes are made.
That's why you like Dr. Gaskin, because you can talk to him. Dr. Gaskin's good.
Yeah. All right. We'll take a break on that note. When we come back, if you're on hold, stay there. Tanya, Rose, and others, we'll get to your calls, questions, comments. If you have a possible case, call in. This is where Clint can help you out on that. The number is 737-7587. More right after this.